In today's tutorial, we're going to look at how to make a selection box and select the objects inside that box. We're not going to look at doing anything with those selected objects because it depends on the game what you'll actually do with them. So I've just made a simple scene and put 4 planets in. You can put any objects that you want. Just have some objects that you can select. It doesn't matter whether it's a 3D object or a sprite, it'll work with whatever object you have. You're also going to need a selection box sprite. Very simple. All it is a border around an image, but I'll include a download link if you don't want to make it yourself. So you'll want to set this to be a sprite. And you can see here it is just the border around it and an empty center. I'm going to create an object and I'm going to create a UI canvas. I'm going to set it to my camera. And I'll make my distance 1. I'm just going to make my gizmos a little bit smaller because they're in my way. And now to the canvas, you want to add an image. I'm going to call it image selection box. Let's drag our selection box onto this. With our selection box, you're going to want to go to the sprite editor. If you don't already have it installed, you'll need to go up to your package manager and install it. Remember to change it to Unity Registry. Search for sprite and install it. Now that you installed your sprite package, you can click on the sprite, you can go to the sprite editor and you can now 9 slice it. So I'm just going to drag these in. And hit apply. And what this will do is when it stretches your selection box out, it won't stretch the corners, but it will stretch these areas. And that means you can make the selection box any size and you won't see any stretching. I'm just going to take this down to the bottom corner. This. Now a very important step here. You want to change your anchor point to the bottom left corner. If you don't do this, when you make your selection box, you'll see that it isn't aligned. So if you get to a later stage and you're like, I can see my selection box dragging out, but it's not aligned with my mouse, your anchor point is most likely to be the problem. So let's anchor it bottom left. And now let's make a script to do the work. And let's double click it and open it in Visual Studio. To do this, we're going to need a few variables. We're going to need boolean to determine whether we're actually dragging or not. We'll need the start position of the mouse and the end position of the mouse for drawing the box. And we'll need the rect transform of that selection box that we put on the UI. We won't need the start function, so let's delete that. Now the first thing we're going to need to do is see if the mouse is down to see if we're about to do a drag select. I'm also going to make it that a click won't enable a drag select. You actually have to drag a little bit out to make the box. And so get mouse button down is the left mouse button. And what we'll do here is we'll set our initial mouse button to where the mouse is placed on the screen, and we'll still leave our drag select as false. You don't actually need the is drag select false here, but I just put it here in case you want to make a more complicated system with this, and then you might want this here. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to look if the mouse button is just pressed rather than down, and see if you've dragged a little bit away from the initial position. This magnitude is just how far you have to move your mouse. You can change that number to suit how far you want it before it turns into a drag select. I find this is a really important thing to do because most of your systems won't just have a drag select, you'll also have a click on something. So you'll need to be able to tell a difference between a click and a drag. Next up, if it is drag selected, we'll set our mouse end position to our input mouse position, and then we'll have to update our selection box. So I'll need to write a function to do that. So in our selection box, the first thing we're going to want to do is set the game object for our selection box to active. So I'm using the isDragSelect variable here, but you can also call this function if drag select is false, and it will hide the selection box. The next thing we're going to need to do is get the width and the height of our selection box. You can do this by subtracting the initial mouse positions for both the X and the Y. Next, we can get the size of the selection box by putting the width and the height into a vector 2. Now I've used mathf.abs, which stands for absolute value, and what this does is if the width is negative, it'll turn it into a positive. Likewise for the height, this means that for our size delta, we'll always have a positive number. Next up, now that we've set our selection box to the correct size, we need to put the actual point of the box in the right place. So to do this, we're going to use the anchored position. So we'll set this to the mouse initial position and initial Y, and then this point is going to be the center of the box, so we'll add half of the width and half of the height. Let's go back up to our update and also make it so that when we put our mouse button up, we stop selecting. Now we're going to call the update selection box here, because now we've made drag select false, it'll hide the box so you can no longer see it. While this hasn't done the selection part, we should have managed to get a selection box working, so let's go back to Unity and give this a test. So we need to drag a drop select script over, and we need to put our image selection box into the rect transform. I also made my image selection box inactive so that you can't see it initially. And all you need to do here is change your image type to sliced, and then we use that work that we did previously on the slicing the image. Let's hit play again. And there we have a nice selection box. You'll see in my box that I have a little bit of alpha transparency in the back. I just did that because I thought it looked good. You can make this box however you choose. You can also, if you want, change the color of this box. So for example, you could have a purple selection box. Now that we have our selection box working, we need to make it so that when we drag over a number of these planets and let go, we actually select them. Let's go back to our script and do that. So to do that, we're going to write the select objects function, and I'm just going to put that in the get mouse button up. You're going to call it here because that's when you want to select your objects. If you wanted to update those objects as you were going, you might want to put it in this part of your, you might want to put it into the if get mouse button part of your code. So let's go write the select objects function. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get a min value and a maximum value on the screen of where I'm going to capture all of the objects in between. And you're adding this selection box divided by 2 because you got to remember that the anchored position is in the center, so you want to go to the bottom corner or the top corner. And next thing I'm going to do is to work out which objects I'm going to test to select. I'm just going to use the tag system inside of Unity. So I'm going to tag any object that I want to be selectable with a tag called selectable. Then I'm going to use the game object find objects with tags to get an array of all of the objects with that tag. Remember to use find objects with tag, not find objects with tag, or you'll only get one object back. And now all we need to do is loop through this array and see if any of those objects are within the min and max values. The first thing we'll do is we'll get the object's world position and put it into a screen position to see where it's placed in the screen. Now remember, if you're not using the main camera, you might need to substitute this with the camera that you're actually using. Then all we need to do is write a nice long if statement which tests whether the object's X position and the object's Y position fall within that. So in here is where you'll need to put any code that you want to put to do whatever you want with those selectable objects. That might be, for example, to put a little circle around the bottom of it to show the object is selected. For demonstration purposes, I'm just going to grab the renderer component and change the material color on it. Now we can save this and go back to Unity and give it a go. Go to your tags, add a tag, add the tag selectable. I'm going to grab the 4 planets and I'm going to tag them all as selectable. Let's press play and give this a go. So you can see that the planets are turning red when I select them. At the moment there's no deselect, and that's something that you would have to do yourself. If you want me to go further and show you, for example, how to put the circles underneath the units when selected and how to deselect objects, let me know in the comments. I'm happy to do a tutorial on that as well. Hope you found this tutorial useful, and if you did, please like, subscribe or comment. It really helps me grow this channel. I really want to continue doing these tutorials. I hope you have fun in your game development.